Well, this is so exciting. This is so great. I appreciate very, very much you coming out here tonight and join us to learn more about hemp in all its various forms. And let's look at Europe in general. And so the hemp cultivation in the EU, it's actually difficult to find information, find statistics in Europe because hemp is often grown as like a lot of the farms are quite small. And we're not part of the official EU statistics. I'll show that later on why that is. So you kind of have to go and find the data. So there's not always reliable data from every year. But this is kind of what it looks like. 2016, 33,300 hectares of hemp in the EU in terms of farming. We believe that last year it was maybe about 50,000, so it does keep growing. There's an interesting anomaly here. If you see that dip around 2010, 2011, shows you how important political decisions are, the impact certain EU regulations have, and things like subsidies. As you might know, probably that in the EU of the budget, more than 50% is directly tied to agriculture. So EU is very much an agricultural project. Some people say that if you count some of the kind of indirect causes, it's more likely to be like 80% is kind of tied to agriculture. Around here, end of 2009, the EU introduced subsidies to kind of encourage farmers to grow biofuels. And that's a great idea, but they didn't allow hemp to be grown for biofuels, so it was corn or maize. So the subsidies were so high that as a farmer you would actually make more just in subsidies alone from growing corn than you would get from selling the hemp you were growing. So of course you'd see a lot of farmers shift to growing corn in those years. Probably because this program was so effective that there were more than enough corn being grown in Europe that then they adjusted these subsidies, balanced it up a little bit, and basically asked farmers getting subsidies to start growing something else as well, not just corn. And we saw that it started coming back up again. And then this demand started growing. The kind of healthy foods with hemp seeds and so forth has been kind of part of that, plus the use of some of those biocomposites, the hemp plastic in dashboards for luxury cars, for example. France has throughout the last decades been the biggest producer in Europe. And it's been a lot of industrial hemp for industrial purposes. So a lot of the kind of biocomposites for cars and also some of the interiors in things like aeroplanes, they use this hemp plastic. And also we've seen Romania has had a long tradition of using hemp. It's literally the only place where we get some European hemp fabric is still made in Romania. But the scale is small. They use machinery basically from the Second World War. So the capacity is quite small, and the kind of variety of different textiles you can get from there is still quite small. You can see some of the products out there. The hemp clothing is actually made in Romania, but the big player today is China in hemp fabrics. So one of the projects we are involved in now is to get more hemp textile also going in Europe, but very likely looks like Turkey will be the kind of the European country to take this on board on a massive scale and invest in the infrastructure and so forth. Let's look at, so in Europe you have 70 different varieties of cannabis sativa L, which is the industrial hemp that can be grown. We tend to use mostly the Futura 75. We see a lot of the Finola, the Fedora around, some of the Polish varieties as well. But all of these have slightly different properties. They're good for different either climates or purposes. Some grow more of a CBD content, and some are better for the fibers and so forth. So there's kind of the variety that European farmers can work from today. So these are all approved to be grown. And then in a lot of countries you need a license to be able to grow hemp. And we have this 0.2% THC limit for cultivation of hemp, which actually is the lowest in the world. So if you go to mostly anywhere else in the world where you can grow hemp, they have at least 0.3, some places 0.6 or up to 1%. So it's more difficult, it's more expensive for European farmers to grow hemp than in the rest of the world. We think it's unfair, it's unnecessary, and we should change that. A quick look at some of these different uses of hemp. So in Europe, of the hemp fibers, a lot of it goes to biocomposites, so that's kind of like the hemp plastics. Cars, Mercedes and BMW, for example, will use this for some of the dashboards, airplanes, and then you have the insulation is about 1/4 of the fiber goes to walls. You can make, for example, these blocks of insulation material. It's a really good for the heat transfer, and basically also like when you move over to the building materials, one of the antibacterial properties and things like the fact that you get these materials are very fire resistant. It's just amazing. So there's so many great properties. But these numbers are very small. If you look at the overall hemp production here, we're talking 33, maybe it's 50,000 hectares now. It's not a lot. So it's no wonder there's not a lot of hemp houses around. I've been to a few, but it's still a very rare thing. The sheaves, you can use them mostly they're actually sold for animal bedding. They're great for horses, for example. They don't dust, and they are antibacterial, and there are a lot of great properties also for smaller animals. For the construction industry, Marian explained how to mix it with limestone, and you get this great hempcrete. And but the amount. So if you look at the tonnage here, so the construction is like 5,000 tons. It's nothing, absolutely nothing. So, but it also shows you what an incredible opportunity we have here to grow a lot more hemp and put it to good use. Hemp seeds has grown more popular. Again, we don't have a lot of the latest numbers because there is no official statistics about this. But the healthy food trend has really benefited the seeds, the oil seeds, and so forth. And the kind of measurements about CBD is very new. CBD oils basically just started happening last year in terms of something people paid attention to, right? I started with cannabis in the beginning of last year, so basically spring of 2018. At that point, there was no media about CBD oils and hemp extract. Nothing. A few months later, come June 2018, and it just suddenly explodes. It was everywhere. And today, pretty much everybody has heard of it, right? So the whole thing has changed so fast. In my opinion, if I look at what the law says, there is no legal issue. There are opinions about it. There are authorities who are trying to impose something else. But if you look at food law and novel foods law and everything is fine, and it used to be fine. For the last 10 years, looking at the legislation, actually CBD oils were perfectly legal. And we think they still are. It's just that the opinion on what is novel has changed. And I'll show you a little bit of that. So when you look at the kind of legal situation in Europe, you have to start from, is there THC in it or not? That's like a good starting point. And if it's a no, and we are talking about non-detectable, basically, there are very few countries where you can have extremely small amounts of THC. We're not talking about 0.2%. The 0.2% actually applies to the plant and farming. It doesn't mean end product. So some marketers or companies have kind of taken it to mean we can have 0.2% THC in our product, but that's actually not what the law is about. It's actually about the farming side of things. So if there is THC in it, it's basically a controlled substance. It's a licensable drug. So there's another legal development here now, or a political kind of development where we want to change that. And the United Nations is looking to kind of degrade and make changes to how they view THC as well, and the marijuana plant. And this is where certain authorities go wrong. So, like the Icelandic Medicines Agency say, hey, it contains CBD, therefore it's a medicine. That's logically not correct. Legally, in most countries, it would not hold. If you'd apply, for example, the European Medicines Directive to that logic, it falls. Case law says that's incorrect. You can't just point at the product and say, hey, that's a medicine because it contains this substance, especially if that substance is a naturally occurring substance in a plant like the hemp plant. If it's used and marketed as a food, then it's a food. And there's different types of categories of food. Just food, like olive oil and bread. And there's no registration for this. Most countries, you don't go and get your bread approved or your olive oil approved. There are safety laws and laws you have to follow, but it's your responsibility as a food producer to follow that law. And this is how most of the CBD oil, for example, in Europe gets sold as a food. It's hemp extract, and so it comes from a plant. We take the extract out using approved extraction methods. So the extraction methods are traditional. A lot of people like to vape their CBD oils. It's becoming popular, and also it's a hot topic now. But in terms of the legislation in Europe, there's a tobacco products directive. And the tobacco products directive basically applies for products with nicotine. And if the product doesn't have nicotine, then there are no other laws than generic safety and consumer laws, and this, those apply in that case. Some countries are imposing or trying to apply the tobacco products directive also on vapes that are nicotine-free, but those are the exception. Let's get a quick look at the novel food situation. So these are foods, and this could be relevant, of course, here as well, but if you look at what the debate is in Europe about hemp extracts and CBD, there's a lot of discussion about novel food, And foods that are not consumed by Europeans to a wide degree before 1st of May 1997 might kill you. So be very careful. Well, it's a sensible law in a sense, because if you bring a new exotic berry from somewhere, or have a new method of creating foods, you have to prove that it's safe. But the criteria are very tight. It is, as I've said, usually a 2 to 3 year process minimum, and quite an expensive, difficult process to go through. So you only do that if you believe your food is novel. If you believe it's not, then you would kind of argue that this is not novel. This is something people have eaten before. When the novel foods legislation came in force, the hemp industry was asked to provide kind of evidence of traditional use of hemp flowers and leaves. Those are the ones they wanted to look at, because the seeds were already okay. The use of seeds and seed oil were not considered novel at all, but the industry was asked to provide evidence of use of flowers and leaves, which they did. Various types of pieces of evidence, anything from cookbooks from the Middle Ages to recent statistics from the German Hemp Association. And extracts are things like, when you make a drink from hemp flowers, then you are extracting what's in the hemp flower, and the hemp flower does contain CBD. So that's a great example. And quickly, what we're doing now in the industry, together with some of the other companies, is work through the European Industrial Hemp Association. They started about 18 years ago as an association, mainly for the European hemp farmers. And now in the last few years, they've grown bigger and stronger because of all the new companies coming in the hemp industry, including those who sell a lot of CBD products, such as us. So we can join in and help both provide funding and put in time and effort to do what we can to meet with legislators and so forth to educate them about hemp. And EIHA, the European Industrial Hemp Association, has a couple of targets. They of course, want to establish the legal status of hemp extracts as a food and food ingredient, just to clarify it, that these are not novel and we should be able to keep selling them. And to increase the max limit of THC in foods, the residue of THC in foods that is allowed at the moment in Europe is so small that if you applied the same for alcohol, then orange juice would be illegal. So it's crazy. So that also needs to change. It's more kind of relevant. And of course, to get the hemp crops listed in Eurostat and things like this, so we start paying attention to what's going on. Here's our position when it comes to the food and the novel food and so forth. We think the leaves and flowers and hemp extracts made with the traditional extraction methods, they're just simply foods. They're traditional foods, and also the cannabinoids like the CBD, they exist naturally in this food. There is some interesting research, and it's kind of difficult to prove today, but before hemp disappeared from our food chain, we would have had quite a lot of intake of CBD also indirectly via the food chain, via eggs and milk and meat and so forth, because hemp was such a common animal feed, and we would get it through consuming milk and eggs, for example. Isolated cannabinoids, so like CBD isolates or genetically modified plants. Those are, we agree, those are novel. We haven't had those before, so we have no problem them being classified as novel. Because here's the thing. We talk about hemp extract. It sounds like, ooh, maybe it's something new. Well, as I mentioned, like when you make drinks, those are extracts. Extrahere in Latin means to draw out. You're pulling something out. So use something like an alcohol. You can use fat. You can use water to pull something out of the plant. Like when you make coffee, you're not eating the coffee beans. You're actually drinking coffee extract. That's what coffee is. And in the same way, hemp extract and the CBD oil is actually just like making a tea or making a coffee out of hemp. It just happens to be very, very, very healthy. But so is green tea, right? It's a healthy tea, and CBD oils are healthy oils made from plant. More information about Canaway at canaway.com. We have an initiative called Hemp for Humanity, which we use to sometimes just educate about hemp around the world. We did an event in Vienna in March. Austria has been one of the more difficult countries in Europe. The previous government that then fell this summer because of scandals, they went after the hemp industry very, very hard. We had a number of contacts with the authorities trying to stop us and so forth, but none of them have led anywhere. And this is where actually the legal position is quite strong for the industry, because once you're attacked and you reply properly, so far the problems have always gone away. And this is why I think the hemp is here to say you can't stop it. It's too big already. And I think in Brussels, for example, the European Commission, they understand this. So it's not like we have enemies there or something. They say that the member states are more problematic. So some of the countries, like actually Sweden and Finland, my two home countries, and countries like Austria are kind of negative for various reasons. But the kind of clever people in Brussels know that if we stop this, we're going to create a huge black market. 75% of all users of CBD products say that they would still keep buying the products if they were illegal. They would still source them from somewhere, buy them from China, buy them from America, and then definitely like the security and the safety goes down because you don't know what you're buying. So it's really important for us to just establish the legality right now. And support the European Industrial Hemp Association. You can actually become an associate member there, and that way, I know Iceland is not part of the EU, but you tend to kind of follow very often things that happen there. And as EEA members, we should actually be able to ship products to you guys. So and we did. So here's part of why we are here as Canaway. We had the Icelandic market open for 2 weeks last year in May 2018. We shipped CBD products and so forth for a glorious 2 weeks. About 30,000 euros worth of products. It was a good start. And then everything got stuck in customs ever since. Thank you so much.